This is the Manny Matsakis Show with me, Manny Matsakis, where you will gain insight on how to win on the field and optimize your life. This is episode number 8. Today, we're going to analyze a book that directly relates to coaching a specific side of the ball, written by one of the legends of the game, Fritz Shurmur. The book is called Coaching Team Defense. And let me just give you a little bit about the author here. So if you're younger and don't really know who this guy is, which is understandable, you certainly want to study the game, and he is a key guy in the game. Here's a little bit about Fritz. Over the course of his 45-year coaching career, Fritz Shurmur was regarded as one of the top defensive coaches in the game. The defensive units he coached, college and professionally, were characterized by their tenaciousness, as well as their physical and intelligent play. They were described as intense, the major characteristic used to describe their coach, both on and off the field. Fritz, who coached in the National Football League for 24 seasons, was a firm believer in the potential for greatness that is possible when people work hard together. His coaching philosophy was built on a strong commitment to the team, its goals, and its objectives. He believed that without exception, the most successful teams always have been those who placed a strong emphasis on the team. All right, and we'll come back to that here as we get into the book. Now, he had a long career, fantastic career, coached in college, actually graduated from Albion College in Michigan, which is a team that we play here at Defiance College, which was sort of neat to know that. Something I didn't know, but I did know in 1962 he was a defensive coach on the University of Wyoming staff, a place that I actually coached, and I remember people still talking about Coach Shurmur because in those days he was one of the top NFL defensive coordinators of his time back in the late 80s when I was there. His career started in the National Football League in 1975 for the next 19 seasons. From 1975 to 1993, he coached in the NFL for a variety of teams, including the Detroit Lions, the New England Patriots, the Los Angeles Rams, and the Phoenix Cardinals. In '94, that's when things really started to accelerate for Coach Shurmur. He accepted the position as defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. 3 seasons later, his defense played a significant role in winning Super Bowl 31 in 1997 over the New England Patriots. At every stop of his exceptional coaching career, Shurmur was renowned for having an innovative mind on defense. His impact on the defensive side of the ball, as well as the game itself, was profound and has been and will continue to be highly regarded in the coaching community. Almost 2 decades after his death in August of 1999, he remains one of the most respected individuals to ever coach the game at any competitive level. And that is Fritz Shurmur. And as we get into this, now I want to introduce you to my co-host, Jovon Johnson. How we doing, Coach?
All right.
Well, Jovon and I coached together, but we've known each other since 2009. All right. Yeah, when I was with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Jovon was fantastic football player for us. Played in the league up there, played in the National Football League, played in the Canadian Football League. Lengthy career. How long did you play totally in the pros?
13 years.
13 years. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it had been influenced by some great coaches when he was an all Big 12 performer, or Big 10 performer at the University of Iowa, a Hawkeye. And you were there. Kirk Ferentz was the head coach.
Yep.
All right. And
still there.
Yeah, and your defensive coordinator
was Norm Parker. Yeah. When I was there, but now it's Phil Parker, who was our defensive backs coach when I was there.
Yeah, so that gives you a little idea, and that they've always had. Iowa's been known for great defense.
Yeah,
and I thought at one point I wanted to give you this book and say, hey, take a look at this, and then we'll take a deep dive into this baby on a podcast.
Oh yeah,
and I think sometimes what's fun for me is when we do these types of analysis of the book, and you see how you can apply it. When you do this, and you know you have a show coming up, totally different. right?
Yeah, it's definitely different.
I mean, you got to know because you have to teach it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it all. And that's why I think there's so many good things in this particular book. You know, I want to get into the book and take a really good look at this baby because, you know, anybody watching this on our website, mannymatsakis.com, or on the YouTube channel, this is what the book looks like. We'll make sure that on the website we have a link if you want to go buy the book. I'd highly recommend it. But, you know, reserve your judgment. Take a look as Jovon and I get into this a little bit. Let's get back to the book here. Chapter 1, Goals and Objectives. Coach Shurmur has some interesting viewpoints on coaching defense that maybe not all defensive coaches espouse. You know, maybe that's not really what they're all thinking, because I see the game today, maybe some guys are a little bit different than others, but you guys decide as we go through the key points of playing great team defense, because the book isn't called Coaching Defense. You see what I'm saying? It's called Coaching Team Defense, and the biggest font on the cover is team. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that it's like, oh, that's what this guy is really about.
Yeah.
Right. And let's take a look. I want to read out of the book here and then get your insights, Jovon, and see what you think. Number 1, prevent the score. All right. And there is no question that the number 1 objective of a defensive football team is to keep the opponent from scoring. I know this point would seem to be so obvious that it need not be mentioned. However, in the past few years, there's been such a widespread emphasis on statistics. It appears at times that the number of yards gained, rushing or passing, or the opponent's first down, sacks, or interceptions are more important than the number of points scored on a defense. How about that? Right?
That means that the defense is stopping them from getting in the end zone.
Yeah, and that's really what job number 1 is, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing, Coach. I'm looking at this, and he says something that I see so much in the game. And maybe it's always been there. I just notice it because after I read a book like this, it's like sometimes when you become more attuned to something, it's like, you notice it out there, you know, whatever it might be. He says down here, he goes, a defensive line coach obsessed with the number of sacks, linebacker coach only concerned with the number of tackles, or a secondary coach who sees only the number of interceptions as his major concern are all examples of ways that men responsible for reinforcing the major objective of a defensive team may, by intent or accident, which I think a lot of time is an accident, erase obstacles to the success of the group. Whenever this situation occurs, it is the responsibility of the coordinator or whoever is in charge of the defense to redirect or refocus the individual or group that is involved, basically to prevent the score, right? And a lot of times, you ever notice that you got a team that maybe has a good defense, but they're not winning a bunch of games.
Yep.
Right? And what's the first thing they do? We get so many interceptions, or we're so many turnovers, right?
Yeah.
It's all stats.
Yep.
Happens on offense too, right?
Yep.
I mean, I see teams like, oh, we're losing records, awful, whatever, but we're the number 1 passing team in the league. What's that really matter?
Right. It doesn't correlate.
Right. So what have you noticed in your career? Have you seen this happen at times?
Yeah, I mean, there's been numerous times where you've been on teams that win a lot of football games, have some outstanding players, and it's crazy that the teams that win, how much emphasis they put on the statistics of those individual players. It's like they broadcast it and they showboat it and talk about it all the time, when the most factor is how well those guys play together as a team. You see it. I've seen it in NFL. Guys get rewards for getting statistics, so it's like a big deal. Playing in the Pro Bowl, even though you're playing on a losing team. I mean, It's kind of overshadowed by the success of the team sometimes, the amount of statistics that you have.
Yeah, it really does. And it's amazing that's what happens, because in the end, it is, at least on the defensive side, it's about preventing the score. On offense, it's about scoring. It's, if you look at it, it's the other. I look at it as a head coach. It's important to understand that any head coaches out there, you want to make sure that either side of the ball you're on, I think it's really important to have a team mentality. It's like, I think you definitely want an identity for each side of the ball in your kicking game, but an identity should not take away from the team. And I've seen that before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many times have you seen, or it could have been a team you were on, or maybe an opponent, and they're all about their offense.
Yeah.
Right? That's all you hear about is their offense. And you don't realize how good that defense might be.
Right. I mean, we went through that in Winnipeg in 2011. Our defense was number one in all categories throughout the league, and we were playing at an all-time high. But nobody ever really talked about our offense. But our offense is the one that we're putting up the points, keeping us in the game, keeping our defense fresh and off the field. Our offense moved the ball. I mean, just moving the ball alone, they were moving the ball closer to our end zone, and then if they had the punt, then that team would be backed up, and then when we get the ball back, we'd be closer to our end zone. Yeah. And they played the field position game, and eventually they got in the end zone. Regardless of how great our defense was, our offense still played a major factor in how well we were able to play as a defense. So I mean, it all correlates, and it's all team specific, but nobody really talked about our offense, but our defense was top notch. So yeah. I mean, it kind of overshadowed the offense.
Yeah, it happens
all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the Power 5 level, you look at a team like Alabama. For the longest time, it was Nick Saban's defense. It was whatever that was, right? And but you got to score. So there's the other side, and then all of a sudden they got Tua as quarterback. All of a sudden they got this explosive offense, and the defense is still really good, but nobody's even talking about them. They still got 8 or 9 first, high draft choices on the offense and the defense. But, I think it does come down to that team mentality, which, like them or not, when you look at a team historically like the New England Patriots, it's like they win because of the team, and there is no, I mean, you could say that for years Tom Brady was the star, but, they
had a really good defense.
Yeah. Great defense, and they all understood. I think that's why they won so many championships together.
Yeah, they understood that Tom was going to get all the credit.
Yeah,
and I was fine with the team, because at the end of the day, everybody still played their role, and everybody supported one another, regardless of who was getting the attention. It's never about that.
No question. Now, here's the second one of the goals that Coach Shurmur talks about. Physically dominate the opponent. Okay, the physical aspect of the game of football is the factor that makes it different from any other sport. I mean, too often, a lot of coaches will get they'll get caught up in the X's and O's, and they're trying to out finesse everybody. But in the end, it's still a physical game. It is blocking and tackling. And when you've been on the best defenses that made great things happen, were they not physical?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we like to refer to it as imposing your will. In defensive football, you want to take and control the line of scrimmage first and foremost, but you want to impose your will on the ball carrier, whether it's the guy with the football or a guy trying to block you. You want to make sure that you're physical in all aspects of it, and that in turn will wear on the offense, and it'll start. You'll find out what a lot of guys are made of at that point.
Oh, yeah, you really do. And I think in the book, what I thought was interesting was, here, just back the book for a quick sentence. He goes, the good coach makes some phase of hitting, toughness, and physical dominance a part of every meeting he has with his team. See, that makes a lot of sense. See, and I'm guilty of this at other places I've been as a head coach. It's like, I coach the offense, and I always have. And I see this. Me reading this book makes me understand, what? You're talking to the whole team, right? And when you're done, the defense coordinator takes them, the offense takes them. But as a head coach, when you're talking to the team, it's important that you talk about, on all sides of the ball and the kicking game, about hitting, toughness, physically dominating the opponent, because that's what football is. And even if, like for us, we're a run and shoot style team, doesn't mean you cannot hit, or you're not physical on offense.
Right.
So I think there's a certain amount of, you have to coach it. Right?
Yep. And I honestly believe that a lot of people look at physicality as being a physical thing, just because of the nature of how we the words has evolved. But physicality could be a mindset too. You have to train your mind to be physical. You're just not going to walk in a room and just know you're going to just run through a wall and hit somebody. Some guys will do it, some guys won't. So you just, as a coach, you have to continue to put that in their mind that, being physical is important and imposing your will on the opponent is important. So it's a mindset as well.
Yeah, and it is. And what I like is he gets into the book here, and he's just talking about a key factor in this is body position. What you're coaching, and in order for a player to hit with authority and make plays, he has to have his body in proper position to physically dominate a ball carrier, or anything that's happening. If his body's not in proper position, you're not really going to ever make the hits you need to make that impose their will, your will on the opponent.
Yep.
Right? So you got to teach that all the time. It doesn't matter, however you do it. But here's a guy that says this right here. And some people, I've heard different things. And in this day and age, with the advent of rugby tackling and all the different types of ways that you want to teach defense, safety for the the head, the helmet, and so forth. He talks about defensive players must be coached to two-hand touch every ball carrier or receiver below the waist. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's practicing good habits, being in the right body position. If you're able in practice to get in position to two-hand touch a guy on the waist, then that means that in the game, if you ran through the tackle, you'd be able to bring him down to the ground. I mean, it's putting you in a great body position to be able to make that play.
No question. And he has certain things as our listeners and people watching this out there, as you're engaging in this book, I think you're going to notice that you need to get this book, because we're just gleaning our key concepts and talking about it. There's so much more to this. But here's another thing that he brings about in the same area here right now, and I've seen this, and I never thought about it quite this way. He goes, teams whose players engaged in spearing, hitting after the whistle, hitting players out of bounds, or any other type of illegal activity are exhibiting a type of behavior I detest. He goes, they are only admitting by their actions that, now here's the key, they are not good enough to play the game well within the rules. They're just not good enough. Right? I feel that these types of actions are reflections on the coach and his inability, now coaches out there, here's the key, and his inability to teach his players to play the game well from a physical standpoint within the rules. It also reflects on the coach's inability to discipline his team and demand that they play the game as it is meant to be played, physical but clean and within the rules. Yeah. Now, I know when I said that, the hair had to stand up on the back of your neck, because you are very disciplined.
I am. We had a few incidents just this past season with a couple of our guys, getting a little carried away, letting their emotions get the best of them, and I had to pull them to the side. A couple of times I had to take guys out off the field, and guys would get upset. But at the end of the day, you're hurting the team by playing outside of the rules and, kind of doing your own thing. So if you don't discipline guys for doing stuff like that, then they're going to continue to do it, and then it's going to continue to hurt the team. So, I'm a big disciplinarian. I'm major on being disciplined. If you can't play discipline, you can't play football.
Yeah, and it's so right, and I think that's a key in that section in and of itself. I mean, you're still talking about physically dominating the opponent. It's just how you do it.
And you got to be controlled. I mean, football is a violent sport. You got to have controlled violence. If you can do it within the whistles, then it's okay. But anything after the whistle is not.
Yeah, no question. The next big area here in the goals and objectives is prevent the big play. The explosive play, it's often called, right? Yeah. It's like the big pass, the big run. Nothing has a bigger impact on a defensive team than when the opponent makes a long run or completes a long pass.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like defensive players, he says, have to constantly be reminded of the importance of breaking or running to the ball when it is thrown. Making sure that everyone gets in position.
Yeah.
Jovon, the other day I was watching something on YouTube. It might have come up on my Facebook feed, something, and this guy is a coach down at Angelo State in Texas. Young coach talking about a drill that they do, and I thought it was a really good drill. It's like they spread, they go down, and let's say the ball's on the 30, and you've got a guy on the top of the numbers, offensive going in the red zone, top of the numbers, hash mark, the other top of the numbers, spread across the field. So you got these 4 guys on offense, and they all have the ball. All right, so they got the ball. All right, the defense, there's 4 of them, right, and they're 10 yards away. And the coach is back in the end zone behind the defense. And he picks one of the 4 guys, right, on the offense to be the ball carrier. The defense doesn't know, right? So it could be 1, 2, 3, or 4. He picks the guy, that guy takes off. And then what happens is it's a play for offense and defense. The offensive guy, can you make a guy miss to get to the end zone? Basically, defensively, are you taking the right angles to prevent the big play from happening and so forth? It's just 4 on 4, but actually then it becomes 1 going against the 4 and how the defense reacts to it.
Oh, yeah.
It made a lot of sense. And then, like, let's say the guy gained 8 yards on offense. Now the ball moves up. And they keep going in to the point, it might be on the 3-yard line, but the defense never goes into the
end zone.
Yeah, they're on the goal line if the ball's on the 3, and they're all reacting from that same distance away to make the play.
Right.
I'm like, wow, that makes some sense. And it comes here as a good way to prevent the big play.
Right. I mean, it gives you a great illustration of how to be able to align and take the proper angle. Make sure that you have, like Fritz talks about, being who's the force player. Well, if the outside receiver is the guy running with the football, that outside defensive back has to be the force, which means he has to force the ball back to those other 3 defenders coming on an angle to get to the football. So, I mean, everybody has a role in defensive football when you talk about preventing a big play. A lot of it is like he talks about pursuit to the football. And that is a great illustration of how to pursue the ball by doing that drill. That drill gives you a great illustration of it.
Yeah. You want to do that in training camp?
Oh, yeah. We could do that in training camp. It'd be great.
That's what's great. I think those things we'll find out offensively who can make plays.
Yep.
Make a guy miss, and then we'll find out defensively, they're on an island, and it's important that they understand their role within that.
Yeah.
The next key point in the goals and objective is 3 and out. All right. It's the responsibility of the defense to put its offense back on the field in as good a field position as possible.
Yep.
So that's the goal, 3 and out. You're trying to get your offense back on the field. And there's a whole bend but don't break. Some teams are like that. Some are like, hey, let's get the ball back as soon as possible. But it's like, how many times have you seen defenses that's what maybe they're bend but don't break, but they don't get any 3 and outs, and they wonder, we're not getting our offense on the field enough to score.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big part of the game, especially defensively, to try to force 3 and outs. Again, field position is a big thing in the game, and when you can force an offense to have 3 plays and then punt the ball, it puts you in a better field position offensively to be able to go down and score. So if the offense is backed up and you get them 3 and out, they're punting from their end of the field, and you're getting the ball at midfield, which is a big difference between the offense moving the ball out to the 50 and then punting, and then you getting the ball backed up inside the 20. So now the field position is the main reason for 3 and outs, and it changes the field and gives the offense more of an advantage.
Yeah, no question. And that does make a big difference. I think that if you can get 3 and outs, that has to be a big indicator in a successful defense. Now, we know prevent the score is number one. I get it. But 3 and outs have a big part of it. That's why it's in the very beginning of the book. Let's go back to the book. Next key area is turnovers, interceptions, and fumbles. Basically, those are the things you want to be able to focus on: interceptions and fumbles to get turnovers. And he says here, I know that many coaches claim to coach turnovers on defense. And I remember seeing that when I was at Texas Tech, and I would watch the turnover drills of Greg McMackin, and I coached special teams at that point as well. So I would always go over and help coach the defense during the turnover drill, and we would use that. It helped me to understand, the different parts about how we would do it, how we would tackle, how we would strip the ball,
Right.
how we would use the mechanics of that to make that work out. What have you seen as far as turnover drills that you like?
You got the usual, the strip drill. I like the punch out drill where you're seeking to punch the ball out when you're going in to make a tackle. I seen it where you got 2 guys vicing a tackle where you got a ball carrier and 2 defenders, and one of the guys forcing the ball back to the other guy, and the other guy's taking the ball away, depending on where the ball is and location in reference to the defenders. You got the interception drills. You could create so many different drills when it comes to taking the ball away. There's a bunch of them out there. Yeah. But you could just kind of create whatever you want, whatever works best for the team. But you have to teach it. You have to get the players in mentally to be able to always know that when they're even in practice, they're looking to try to take the ball away. So if a guy's running and he's not secure with the football, go take it away. And then, it is going to create good habits for when you get in a game. It's going to happen naturally.
No doubt. And it's important. I mean, teams that get the turnovers are often winning teams. And that's important. And, for those offensive guys out there listening to this, it's like the offenses that don't turn the ball over can win.
Football.
Yeah, it's about that. And that's a whole other a whole other podcast on just playing offense that way, being able to handle that. The last goal and objective he hits on, which I love, is scoring on defense. Scoring on defense usually occurs more with teams whose basic scheme is pressure, dogging, and blitzing. Those teams score by forcing the offense into making a huge error, then capitalize on it. Although, he says here, reading zone teams are not as apt to score on defense by forcing the big error by applying pressure, they have the capacity for scoring defensive touchdowns here. What are your thoughts? Now, obviously, we want to score. I mean, how do you get that mentality to your players, how important scoring on defense is, and how do you coach it?
You got to preach it. You got to preach it. You got to put it in their minds that anytime you get a turnover on defense, we want to try to put the ball in the end zone. That's going to have a direct effect to moving the ball towards our end zone. So even if we don't score, but we're trying to, the offense is going to get the ball closer to the end zone, so then they can score the touchdown. I've been on teams where we take pride in practice and scoring the football when we got a turnover. So, like in Saskatchewan, for example, Coach Chris Jones, he made it a point of emphasis that defensively, when we got a turnover, we wanted to score with the football. So we would get an interception, and then we would figure out ways to get the ball to the end zone. So even if it was, a guy running, if he was going to get tackled and one of his teammates was in the vicinity, we would pitch the ball to a teammate. But we wanted to get the ball to the end zone, and we would practice that. So in the event that in a big game, late in the game, we're down and we need a score, and we get a turnover, we've already practiced how to get the ball to the end zone and do it. So you could practice putting the ball in the end zone when you get a takeaway on defense. And I mean, it's definitely something that you gotta work on it. You definitely gotta coach it, and you gotta put it in the guy's mind that they have the ability to do it when they got the football.
Yeah, I think that's great as far as from a team perspective. I mean, here I am coming from the offensive side of the ball, and I'm thinking, well, in 7-on-7, you get an interception, you should take it to the house.
Right, you should practice it.
Right,
yep.
And then offensively, those guys, when that happens, you need to react to stop that.
Right.
Get in proper position. You're the quarterback and throw it, or the running back that's back there. You need to get the right angle to stop that from happening.
Yeah.
And I oftentimes it's like I see an interception and like maybe the guy will catch it and he'll sprint for 5-10 yards and then that's it.
Yeah.
They don't stop.
Yeah. That's never been for me. When I used to intercept the ball, I would run it all the way to the end zone. Even if the coach didn't want me to, I would do it just practicing good habits. I got cussed out in Saskatchewan my first year in the CFL. I was on scout team, and a guy ran a route on me, and I intercepted the ball and ran the ball all the way back to the end zone. And then Coach LaPolice is like, "You're killing our practice. Like you're like, we're not getting plays in because we got to wait for you to come back. Like we need you to just intercept the ball. If you get it, give it back to the quarterback, and then let us reset so we can do the play over or whatever."
Yeah.
So
interesting.
It is.
I think of that, and if that would happen in our practice like that, well, we would just have another defensive back go in for the play and keep the offense and go.
Right.
Just get it done.
Right.
I mean, we want that. It's such a great mentality to have that you can go into a game knowing that, hey, I would have to think statistically, and you may know more than I on this one, when a defense scores, there's a pretty high percentage you're going to win the game.
Yeah, the percentage goes way up. If a defense scores, it's like a special team score. If you return a kick for a touchdown, the winning percentages go way up. If you score a defensive touchdown, the winning percentages go skyrocketed.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, as we get into the book here a little bit more, so we've got a general, pretty good idea. And shoot, right there, some of the podcasts, we could be done right now. We just hit it all. But there is so much more to get out of this book.
Oh, yeah.
The cool thing is the book itself, like, some books are lengthy. This thing's 121 pages. Right. It's not very long.
Bad at all.
No, it's a read and a reread. And I think it's valuable to coaches as you get into the summer, which the timing of this podcast is great. And you're in the summer, and it's a great summer read for anybody. I think offensive coaches, defensive coaches, it doesn't matter. I think you gain insight by learning from a master of the game. How did this book help you identify ways to put things into perspective?
Fritz talks about having the coaches on the same page. Being a player, you never really pay attention to what the coaches do or how they operate collectively as a unit. But he talks specifically about making sure that the coaches have the same objectives for the players. So, we're all harping on the guys and teaching the guys and telling the guys the same things, and it's going to make us more likely to have success because everybody's preaching and talking about the same language. And that is a big thing for me. He also talks about the mental breakdown and the physical breakdown or makeup of the players and the personnel that you have. So it allows you to kind of get a good grasp on, what you want to do defensively because of what personnel you have. You can't kind of put a personnel on the field and do something defensively that they're physically unable to do. Otherwise, it's going to hurt you. And he talks a lot about that. Talks about different things that you can do for practice prep and, game prep and practice. And it goes back to doing all the little things and how they all equate to the team as a whole defense. So, I mean, he gives you valuable insight. I mean, this book right here was one of the best books that I could ever have read. Now that I'm in my short career coaching, I've learned a lot just from how he views things and some things I knew, but then there was other things that were more in detail and in depth in what's going on. So it gives you valuable insight.
When Coach Shurmur does, he gets into this and then the way we started the podcast going into this guy's career, it's like, the sheer amount of information in a book I keep going back. It's 121 pages.
Right.
But there's so much to this. I think it's a great read for anybody to get some key insight, and then just to reflect on, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing, but it may change some things you thought. Because what I've noticed on all sides of the ball, as coaches, we're a product of maybe who we played for and who coached us along the way, these mentors that we have. Here's a chance to be mentored by one of the greats, right? And we're able to get so much good information. You know, what are some key things the book brought out in light of, it brought to light for you in regards to coaching team defense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he talks about playing hard, playing efficient, and playing together. 3 key mental aspects of the game that you don't really think about how it equates to the whole team and the whole team defensive mentality. But when you got guys that could buy in and commit to playing hard, being efficient, and playing together, it takes you from being average to being really good because everybody's committed to doing the same thing and accomplishing the same goals. He also talks about coaching standards, which is one of the parts of the book that I thought were very beneficial. He says the really good coaches are those who are coaching, emphasizing, and reinforcing the same points with the same emphasis during the last practice or game of the season as they were in fall camp. So, you know, guys that are consistent, guys that, you know, again, talk the same language, hold the guys to the same standard, and they coach and they emphasize things on a day-to-day basis that, you know, we want to get accomplished, and that's major. He also says coaches have the responsibility to encourage players to work toward optimum levels of performance and execution, which optimum levels of performance and execution are doing all the detailed things and the minor things that, you know, create ultimate success for the defense. And, you know, again, it takes you back to the little things, doing all the little things the right way, and demanding a high level of execution from the players at all times. And that in itself, when you do that, you know, you see the level of play increase throughout the season from where they were in fall camp to how good they become by the end of the season.
Yeah, and there's no question about that because it's all about just getting a little better every day.
Yeah.
And that's one of the great ways to be able to do that. You know, the really good coaches are those guys. They're the ones that make a difference that way.
Right.
And, you know, for that reason, you know, coaches have to demand a very high level of execution from their players at all times.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and he makes that statement. I think it's true on all sides of the ball. It's like it's how you do anything is how you do everything.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like you can't be disciplined here and then expect it, you know, and then all of a sudden you think it's just going to automatically carry over for either way. It goes back. No, you have to be that way all the time.
Right.
Because if your players don't see you, you know, if you're not really, if you're wishy-washy about the way you're being, the kids know, the players know.
Yep.
Right. And so the example you give makes a big difference.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They follow your lead, and then being the guy in charge, they have to see you putting the work in order for them to have ultimate success, and they're going to feed off of that. And that's what he talks about by developing the standards of the way you coach and how the coaching staff as a whole works together.
Mm-hmm. Without a doubt. Now, how about let's move a little bit to defending the run from a defensive perspective. All right. So defending the run, just talk a little bit about this book and how it helped you better understand the concept of defending the run. He devotes a whole chapter to it here, you know, and he talks about pressure being a game of angles, alignments, and so forth. And it's like, what is it that you got out of this book? Like, like a lot of times, like we know something, but then when you get it like this, it's like, aha. What were the aha moments for you in here?
Yeah, I mean, he talks about the different alignments and positive gap control. And when you defend the run, you know, everybody has a gap responsibility. And in order for you to be successful versus the run, which is the number one thing you have to stop defensively is the run. Otherwise, you're going to have a long Saturday evening or afternoon. But the being in the right place with gap control is essential to being effective versus the run. Having defensive linemen to get off blocks, use their hands, strike blows, being able to be in a great body position, like he talks about earlier, having leverage, who's the force player, who's the field player. These are things that we need to know on every defensive sequence when we're trying to stop the run, because at the end of the day, everybody has a responsibility. In order for us to be successful, everybody has to fulfill their responsibility to the best of their ability.
Let me ask you, in this chapter specifically, what did you think, it's on page 28 once you get the book, the 5-on-5 drill?
I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, but it's definitely something that could teach you some skills on how to be able to attack and play in short area spaces for linebackers and D linemen. It's a very interesting drill, though. I think that it could be beneficial depending on what kind of run scheme you run. More 5-on-5 drills, more for inside zone.
Yes.
Inside running teams. So it gives you the opportunity to see it and be able to see how the blocks are unfolding for the defensive lineman. Is that guard pulling, or is he base blocking or reach blocking? These different types of blocks are going to change the responsibility of the defensive lineman in order for him to stay in his gap and remain in that positive gap control alignment.
Yeah, I mean, he firmly believes that it's the best way to teach gap control responsibilities for the front. And I can see that. I mean, there's value, and then he has a couple diagrams there. Here's how you do it out of a 4-2 alignment. Here's how you do it out of a 4-3 defense, and basically how you line that deal up. So it makes some sense the way they're doing it here. So I think initially what happens is, on the diagrams I saw, it was a 3-4, which is an odd front, or a 4-3 defensive front, and you're looking at how you want to play, because you got 5 of you on the defensive side, and it's basically you got 5 linemen. There's no tight ends in this particular drill here, the way they have it set up. So it's 5-on-5, but there's 6 gaps and 5 defenders there. So somebody has 2 gaps, and I think that's the beauty of it.
It puts the defensive guys at a disadvantage. So it forces the defensive linemen to remain in their positive gaps. Otherwise, you're going to get gashed because you already down a gap, because we're losing a defender in that particular run formation, the way he got it set up.
Yeah, without a question. Now, he talks about pursuit drills in the run game and so forth, and that is vital. I think every place I've been where we've had really good defensive coordinators, they do some type of pursuit drill, or they pick a different one they do every day. I've seen that too. I mean, when Bob Stoops was with us at Kansas State, we had certain pursuit drills, that we would run, and he had, obviously had learned it when he was at Iowa and so forth as well. But those are important.
Oh, yeah. Heck yeah.
And I think when you look at this, the idea of having daily drills for teaching pursuit, run, and pass.
Right.
Right. So how do you see that playing, and what are some of the emphasis you like to put in to pursuit drills?
Again, when he talks about pursuit, he always talks about the force and fill, the contain and cutback. On every play, there's a guy for all of those responsibilities. The force player is the guy who's going to make sure that the ball doesn't get outside of him. It could be a linebacker, could be a safety, a corner. Those guys are typically force players. They want to cut the ball off and try to bring the sideline from 52 yards to cutting that, down to whatever it may be. Then the field players are the guys that are going to, go tackle the ball carrier after the force player cuts it off. And then you got the contain guy who's, the backside of a cutback. So if they ran a reverse play, the contain guy has to keep everybody, all 11 guys or 10 guys in front of him. And then the cutback guy is the guy who's, if the ball was to cut back, he's the field player in the cutback. So they all have a responsibility. And when you teach pursuit, you don't want guys to over pursue. You want guys to remain on the backside of the hip of the ball carrier, just in case if he does try to cut back against you, you have a better leverage position to be able to make the play.
Oh, without a doubt. Now let's go back to the book here it's page 38. One thing defenses have to be able to do is tackle. All right, so he talks about tackling, and I thought it was interesting here what he said, and I'd be curious to see what you think here. He goes, I have always had some basic rules to which I tried to follow when teaching tackling. I never like to teach tackling full go or live. I think it is always better to walk through tackling drills, gradually picking up the tempo, but never do these drills more than at half speed. That's one part. Then the other is that I always try to get the ball carrier and tacklers as close together as the particular drill will allow. This factor, of course, minimizes the collision by reducing the distance players have in which to gain momentum before impact. In my opinion, it is not wise to turn technique teaching periods into toughness drills. How about that?
That last line tells the story. The not turning technique teaching drills into toughness periods. I mean, you want to make sure that the guys understand, what they're doing when they're trying to go in for a tackle, which keeping them close is going to give them a better vision of what they're trying to get accomplished. And walking through it and doing it in half speed is going to show them how their body should align when they're going into making a tackle. And it's not really about who's the toughest guy in the room. No. So you want to try to eliminate that factor and teach them. They call it in the book. He calls it the teaching alphabet. You want to teach them A before you get to B, and then you want to teach them A again and then teach them B. And right. He goes through that, and that's how you break down every aspect of tackling, and you could do that with many different positions and techniques.
Yeah, it makes a difference, doesn't it?
Makes a huge difference.
And now here's some other, what I call profound knowledge. Like you get a master, there's certain things like we said, you might know, but then you see it in writing. It's like, holy smokes, it's a little different. Mm-hmm. He goes, after many years of teaching tackling, I think that aside from the importance of body position, there are only two critical coaching points. One is the focus or the ability to keep the head and eyes up, focused on the target. Mm-hmm. The other is the ability to use the hands and arms to grab the ball carrier and get him to the ground. It's just two things. Mm-hmm. After body position, that's all he's talking about there. And the ability to see the target adjust to the change of direction is very important.
Right.
That's really what he's talking about. The defensive man has to have his eyes focused and on target. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. You got to laser in, lock in on that near hip. We do drills where we call it near hip, near shoulder. You want to stay on the inside hip of the defender, or if you're an outside guy, you want to stay on the outside hip of that ball carrier. But again, you got to keep your eyes focused on the target. I've always, even in Little League, I heard coaches say, you got to see what you hit. You got to see what you hit. Yeah. And then if you don't see the target, it's kind of hard to zero in on if something that you can't see. And it's hard to make a tackle on something that you can't see. So you got to be able to be ready to change direction. If that guy's not just going to run into you full speed, he's going to look to make a move, maybe try to stiff arm you or something like that. So you got to keep your eyes focused on the target. And then he talks about that, and it's a basic element and something that's so simple but so hard for so many different guys.
Yeah. Here's what I like about this, and I'll give you a quick story here. It's sort of neat. He does say in the book here, he goes, I feel that more tackles are missed because players take their eyes off the target than for any other reason.
Yeah.
Number one. Right? So here's a story for you that I think it has nothing to do with football, but it has everything to do with this lesson. And it dawned on me and has changed the way I've coached from when I heard this. And I was years ago it would have been in the 1997 or so. I was in Denver, Colorado, right? And I'm there, and I was listening to, I went to a seminar by Tony Robbins, okay? A motivational speaker, life coach guy, and he gave a lesson. And one of the lessons had to deal with this specifically. And here's how it worked. He talked about going to a driving school, right? Mm-hmm. A driving school where literally you are going around the track at extremely high speeds. Like for you and I, unless you've driven a car 150, 160 miles an hour on these sides and you're going around, right? You don't understand the amount of focus those guys have to have when they're going NASCAR and all these things, right? So he's at the driving school, and he said what happens is they put him in this, it's called a skid car. All right. And a skid car is you're in the car and there's a guy with you next to you, the instructor. So you got the helmet on, you're going and you're driving around, and as you're going around the turn, right, what happens is you don't know when, but the instructor will hit a little lever, right, and it'll be one of the tires in the car will lift up and it'll start to spin. So he creates a spin for you while you're driving at the time when you least expect it, usually, right? Yeah. So as you're going around the spin, now you have to redirect. And what he says is you have to, as you're coming out of a spin, you have to take your eyes and put them where you want to go, or you'll spin and you'll go crashing into the wall. Right. He goes, and to add insult to injury, if your eyes go to the wall, guess where you're going?
To the wall.
To the wall. And I'm like, that makes sense. Years later, I had bought a Porsche Boxster, okay? And I wanted to test this deal out. So, there's this driving school down in Alabama, and that Porsche had a driving school, and you go through it, and lo and behold, what Tony was talking about is true. I mean, that is really, it has happened that way. And it all led off with the idea that, do you realize that you could be in the desert, imagine yourself driving down the road, and most accidents, and it's just a 2-lane road, most accidents when people are driving their car in their desert are the car hitting a telephone pole, right? What's that mean is when they're driving, going down the road, their eyes are on the telephone pole. Right? Yeah. And then you start noticing your car starts going the way, bam, they hit the telephone pole, and that's the accident. So it's like just what he's saying. If you take your eyes off the target, you're going to miss the tackle.
Yeah.
So those are some things I like to bring to the players and say, look, this is what I notice. And it's the same thing at every position. Your eyes. If you're a running back and you've got the ball and you run to daylight, but if you can't see daylight, you're not going to run to it.
Right.
Everybody thinks, oh, it's natural. No, you can train that.
Yeah.
Right? Just like you're going to train their eyes, in training camp so they can make the tackles. What is it, when we shift gears here about defending the pass? Now, he gives you some insights. I mean, you've been a secondary guy all your life, extensive playing background. You've been coached by some fantastic coaches across the board. What are some things a guy, even of your experience, because, you played how many years in the pros?
13.
13. How many years in college?
4.
All right. 17. How many in high school?
4.
21 plus Pee-wee.
Yeah.
Huh? I mean, you got a quarter of a century of playing this position and defending the pass at some point, right?
Right.
I know you were a quarterback at one point. I know that. I get that. But you see this. What did you glean from this chapter on defending the pass?
He taught me a lot about, the front and the linebackers and what their responsibilities are, pass rush and the alignment and how to get off the ball for defensive linemen. He taught me a lot about, leverage positions and things like that, pass rush moves and these type of things, different gap alignments and stuff like that, all the different rush techniques that you could possibly do, how to make sure that a guy is aligned in the right position so that if you did run a stunt, he can be performance aligned so that, he'd be in a better position. Because he talks about 2-man stunts and 3-man stunts. And if you got a 3-man stunt on, but the defensive tackle or nose is in a position not beneficial for him to run the stunt that's being called, he's never going to get to where he has to get to. So you got a performance align and things like that, teaching you different pass rush things in there. It's a lot to it. I didn't think it was that extensive, but
crazy?
Being able to gain ground and get upfield and different things like that for the rush is it's crazy how many different skill sets these guys have to have up front.
Yeah, makes you respect those guys a little bit more.
Oh yeah. I mean, these guys are masters of their craft. Not only do they have to try to get upfield and try to be strategic on how to get to the quarterback, but they also have to avoid and these disruptions of offensive linemen that are trying to stop them from getting to their quarterback. So I mean, it's a lot going on up there. And those guys they have to be just as smart as the guys in the back end, because it's less communication, but more of a skill set to be able to get to where they need to get to.
Now, how is about when he's talking about actually playing coverage? Mm-hmm. He's got a couple chapters in here on that specifically, pass coverage,
right,
and understanding, zone coverage, man coverage, and so forth. What did you get out of that? Because I mean, there are. There's 4 chapters in here on defending the pass.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he talks about different pre-snap alignments. One thing I try to emphasize to our guys is you don't always want to give the offense the same look. If you give them the same look, they're going to expose you.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get used to you doing the same things over and over and over again, and they watch film just like we do, and they prepare the same way we do. So, you can't always give them the same look. You got to change it up a little bit, whether it's just a little subtle change or if it's a drastic change, but you don't want to overemphasize trying to do too much so that you are taken away from executing your own responsibility. But you still got to give them a different look every time. You can't just line up the same way all the time.
So you're talking about just the pre-snap read. You need to change it up.
Oh yeah.
So these guys do that, right?
Right.
Now here's what's interesting, and I'm trying to think. Oh, I know what it was. I sent this to a buddy of mine. There was something. I don't know. I saw it, like, you're sort of looking on the internet for stuff, and it was an interesting article, or it was an interview with Patrick Mahomes. Okay, mm-hmm. I mean, the dude's amazing passer and all this stuff, right? And he's in there, he's talking, and he goes, yeah, I didn't really till after my middle of my second year, which is just recently, I never read coverages. I mean, I'm talking like in all college. He never read coverages. Is that crazy?
That is crazy.
Yeah. Right?
That is crazy.
So until he got with Andy Reid, where he started to learn that, and whoever his quarterback coach has been, it's interesting. Here he played in an offense all through college. It was like, he was going to say, they just told me throw the open guy.
Yeah.
That is crazy, right?
That
so
is.
Here you got a dude that's at the top of his game, but he's like, now that I know how to read coverages and I see what's happening, there's so much more to it. I'm excited about how good I can get.
I would have hated to saw how amazing he would have been in college if he just read coverage. I mean, from year 1 to year 2 in the NFL, I mean, it was a big difference. I mean, he was the MVP, Super Bowl champion, and but I mean, when you get those little details of being able to read coverage, he's going to be a force to be reckoned with.
Now, let's get back to the coverage concept a little bit, and, there's different kinds of offenses out there. And we're talking about passing offenses right now. Some of them, I put them in different schools of thought. One of them might be a progression type of deal, where almost like what Mahomes was talking about, you're not so worried about the coverage, maybe on a player, but it's like, okay, I look at 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, tuck it and run, or whatever it is, and they're just looking at a progression. And then there's other passing offenses that are literally reading a coverage and seeing how it reacts.
Right.
Is there anything if you know that that's the way an offense is built, any insight you have in how you're developing, or during the week? What are you doing knowing that?
Right. I mean, there are different types of offenses, and those offenses kind of evolve from different zone defenses. So offenses that are more, what is the defense doing? They're going to try to get their receivers in position to be able to sit down in zones. They want to get in the open spot and sit in the window and give the quarterback a target to throw to. Whereas when you got those progression offenses that, you got the deep ball, then you got the intermediate, then you got the check down. Those type of offenses are built off of system, what they want to do, how they want to attack the defense. They want to put more guys to the side of the play where, that now the quarterback has options. So if he gets the one-on-one, throw the deep ball. If they double cover the deep ball, take the intermediate. If you got a zone defender dropping underneath it. If you got a zone defender and he's deep and he can't get that intermediate throw, then go ahead and check it down to the back. And typically teams don't cover the running back or don't cover the check down. So, those check down plays turn into 6, 7, 8 yard gains. Then you get second and short, and then you got an opportunity to win on second down instead of third down. So, progressions are great, and, but I would teach our defenders to, we're going to rally to the check down throw. I mean, obviously you don't want to defend a 5 yard no cover area unless you're in man to man. But in zone, I always teach match the route, don't drop to space, because if you get a curl flat concept and you got cover 2 covered called, the corner's going to take the flat.
Yeah, you got it.
And then that curl window is going to be open. So we want our inside hook curl player to go match the curl. Don't just drop to 12 yards and sit there.
Yeah,
go match the routes, make it a little bit tougher of a throw.
Yeah. So and the advent of the whole match coverage is what we're talking about.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and that does make a big difference. I mean, so in the book, you see all these different ways that he's dealing with the pass, and then as you're moving forward, he talks about playing man pass coverage, right? And what did you gain out of that? As far as playing man, that seemed interesting to you.
He talks about different issues in man. The different techniques that they could play, different ways to double team receivers and stuff like that. Gives you some valuable insight there, how to align based off of, where the receiver is aligned. I teach the DBs to be able to, we call it the divider rule, where we will align based off of where that receiver aligns. So whether I'm going to take an inside shade or an outside shade is based on where our key is. So our man, if he's lined up between the hash and the numbers, I'm going to play outside, because 9 times out of 10, the percentages say if he lines up there, he's going to run an outside breaking route. He's not going to. He's going to
tighten up
down.
to go outside.
He's going to tighten down to go out.
Yeah.
So we're going to play the percentages and line up based on where he aligns. So if the ball's in the middle of the field, the receiver's at the top of the number. Now I'm going to play the inside shade, because that's a normal alignment for a receiver with the ball in the middle of the field. But we teach them, how to be aware of where they are on the field in order to take away what the offense is trying to do to you, because a guy's going to line up to give himself the best position to be able to be where he needs to get to, because all teams have to get to a certain spot on the field.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does make sense as you do that. And it's interesting to me that when you look at it, like the best offenses I've been around, the ones that historically have done very well, are the ones where the quarterback and receivers are on the same page.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, I think it takes reps to get there. It gets to the point where all of a sudden the coverage doesn't matter, and you're actually reading the coverage as you're running, and it's like 1, 2, 3, and it's like I'm always curious from a offensive standpoint what defensive coaches think about if you're going to show this look pre-snap, whatever it is, one high. So it could be cover 3, man free, or you could change it up. And you're disguising. Right? Now, if the receiver is taken off and he's 3 steps into his route, right? Okay, and the quarterback, if he's dropping back, he's 3 steps into it. At that point, I've always believed, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I always want to learn something here, that 3 steps into the route, the coverage is the coverage.
Right.
Nobody disguises something after 3 steps. It's too late. The ball could have been gone by now, right?
Right.
So I think the offenses that, one, guys are on the same page, that can read and react to a coverage. Now, mind you, that's a pretty high level thing to do. You've got 4 or 5 receivers all running, reading, reacting to coverage, and the quarterback sees it, and he gets a hint pre-snap, but later what's happening is he doesn't care until these guys are 3 to 5 steps into it, because you could show me a 1 high look that becomes, 2-man. I mean, you could shift it down.
Yep.
You can make anything because you're the master of disguise, right?
Right.
That's what we're trying to do.
Right.
So if you play a really mature team that knows what's happening, that may be the most difficult thing defensively to deal with. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, there's times where pre-snap and post-snap, pre-snap you're going to show something, post-snap they're going to know what it is.
Yeah.
Then you get into, playing the proper technique, doing the proper responsibility.
That's your key right there.
So once those guys get into, 3 steps down the field as a defensive back, we should have already read through the 3-step. Now we should be eyes on our man depending on what coverage we're playing. So then you could read and react and pattern read so that you can try to make a play. When you get a good quarterback and a good receiver that are on the same page, makes it a little bit tougher, but it just challenges you to be better.
Yeah, you got to get to your level too.
Right.
Yeah, so it all comes with who I believe, and I think we agree to this. It's reps. It's playing with the guys that you're going to be playing on Saturday or on, and you guys are all on the same page.
Yep. I mean, and it's like you said, it's repetitions, and then having that hunger to win the one-on-one, win your one-on-one battle, and if you can win more one-on-ones than the offense, then it gives you a better chance of winning defensively.
Yeah, you're good. How about practice organization? He devotes a whole chapter and an appendix in there that has some pretty good charts and insights and so forth, scouting the opponent. So let's look at just things regarding practice, organization, and planning. Let's talk about how this helps a defense operate effectively.
Yeah,
what do you notice?
He talks about in this chapter that there's 2 types of football practices. One is the preseason or spring ball type, in which the basic goal of the defense are to develop skills and techniques and teach and learn defensive scheme. There's not really much attention to game or opponent specific preparation. And then there's the end season where you're zeroing in on the opponent. And the 2 types of practices call for different responsibilities. In the preseason or spring ball type of practices, you want to place more emphasis on individual and technique improvement and skill development. You're not really, we're not preparing to play against Bluffton, although we are in the spring, but that we're still honing in on our skills and development of our players. And then once you get in the season, you don't really have as much individual time because you have to develop, the team defense as a whole for what the offense wants to try to do to you. So we have to be able to distinguish between the 2 and give ourselves the best opportunity to win football games. And I think he does a great job of illustrating it. He talks about tempo in practice, and you can coach tempo, but you have to preach it, and it starts in meetings where you want to talk about tempo, you want to talk about getting to the football, you want to make it so that it's early, because once you get to the later parts of practice, guys start to fall off, fatigue starts to set in, but you still want to push those guys for tempo, because if you push them when they're tired in tempo and they can do it when they're tired, they're going to do it in the game. And then he also goes into a few other things in here about practice planning. He says the coach is the biggest critic when it comes to practices. Long practices usually occur as a result of poor planning on the coach's behalf.
Exactly. I've always believed that.
You practice scheduled for an hour and a half, and then you end up there 2 hours 15.
Yeah.
It's because you're not happy with something. and then it creates frustration among the players. Guys, that he said it gives you the reverse effect. Like, you're not getting quality reps, you're not doing things that's going to be beneficial to the players. So, he goes into a lot of different parts of this practice preparation thing that gives you some valuable insight on how to schedule and set practices, and gives you a good illustration of how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, putting those practices together, I think, is really important. And I like the idea of I say shorter practice, the more focused practice, because years ago, and let me date myself here a little bit, but it had been in the mid-'90s. I was coaching at Emporia State as a Division II program, right? And that's between Wichita and Kansas City. It's on I-35 there. And one of the things, one off season, I'm looking at this, and we decided to do our scholarshiping a little bit different. We didn't have a big roster. That was just how we chose to compete. Other teams we played might have 100, 120, 130 players. We carried about 60. Like a lot less players, right? So I'll never forget, I go up to, had an idea. I said, let me go up and visit with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Because they're just up the road. And I knew a couple people up there and from my days in Philadelphia. And I was able to get an audience with Dick Vermeil. So we're sitting there, we're talking about stuff. I said, how do you guys practice? Because that's about what they had, once the season got going, and the way that they practice in the pros. They didn't have 100, 120 guys in the pros.
Oh, yeah.
So back then I said, I got to find a way to do this. And that was back then, and a lot of teams in college weren't doing this. We practice only in uppers. We never brought people to the ground. We learned we didn't even condition at the end of practices, because we would go, every practice was less than 2 hours, probably about an hour and 50 minutes is what we shot for. And it was fast, tempo, intense. We got a lot of reps. And then when we were done, that was it. And then we would let guys stay out there to catch balls off the jugs machine and do those other things that are not tiresome on the body.
Yep.
And when we switched to that, we went from pretty good to fantastic, to a top 10 team in the country.
Oh, yeah.
And it is interesting when you decide to change the practice, but you got to be really focused. What I noticed is every rep is even more vital. Right. So it is. So you got to decide when you're scripting 7-on-7 or inside drill, you better make sure you get the right plays in, and you're practicing defensively and offensively what it is you're going to see on game day.
Right.
Right. You can't put everything out there. You can't get good at everything, but you got to get good at what you do.
Right.
And I like that idea that he brings up about having that shorter, intense practice. But there's a lot of planning in it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot.
We did in Saskatchewan with Chris Jones. The way we did practice was very interesting. We would have the one defense and the two offense on one end of the field, and then we would have the two defense and the one offense on the other end of the field, and we would go rapid fire. So one side would go run a play, the other side would go run a play, and we would go back and forth rapid fire, and we would get so many plays in throughout practice. And it allows you to focus on what the offense does. The defense is focusing on what the defense does, but the offensive second team is running scout for the defense, and then vice versa. The defensive second team is running scout for the offense, but you get so many plays in and throughout a practice. Like I'm talking about, we would probably run 100 plays in practice like it was nothing.
Really?
Yeah.
Make sure you bring that back up in our staff meetings and training camp, because I like that, especially after you get out of training camp.
Yeah.
When you start to get into the preparation for opponents, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I am all in with that, because it just makes you better, and you do need reps. Let's look at chapter 11 here, scouting the opponent. All right. And, opponent scout, it's a major part of a game and, practice prep and how you're putting everything together. What insight did the book give you in regards to this aspect of coaching?
He gives you some great insight on how to break down and scout the opponent. Some of it I knew, other parts of it, was new to me. He talks about personnel, formations, down and distance. Those are your three key categories when you're scouting the opponent. But he goes into, running game, play action pass, drop back. Those things, that they happen, but you never really knew. I didn't understand that we had to break it down by individual plays. I just kind of looked at the tendencies. How often are they running on 3rd and short or 2nd and medium or 1st and 10? What plays are they running? How often are they running those plays? It gives you a very good insight. 1st and 10, when you start breaking it down by personnel, personnel is going to tell you a lot based on, who's in the game, what they want to do, how they're going to try to attack you. Gives you very good insight. Allows you want to allow the players to also, try to break down what the guys are strengths and weaknesses are that they're going to play against. He talks about coaches should encourage their players to study their opponent carefully, which, if you can get them, because those are the guys that are going to be on the field. Those are the guys you're going to line up against. So if you don't know anything about this guy that you're lining up against, and then it's gonna come back to haunt you, because you're not going to know what to expect from him. He talks about for personnel, he says not to watch the game as a fan. And, oftentimes players, they'll watch the game and they'll just let it run, but they don't really know what they're looking at. They don't know what they're looking for. So you got to kind of break it down to them in terms that they understand. And personnel is one of them. That's one thing that was big in our spring meetings, was how do we identify the offensive personnel? How do we identify and label formations? We broke all those different things down so that they better understand that, okay, if it's 11 personnel, how many different formations can an offense come out in 11 personnel? They can come out in trips. Yeah. They can come out in pro twin, or they can come out in trips tight with a tight end on the backside of the formation. I mean, there's not many ways they can align. But when you know personnel and you know formations, then it allows you to be able to get lined up, which is half of the battle. If you get lined up and communicate, you can win football.
That's right.
So you break it down for these guys. Play action passes, drop back passes, those are things that you get from film study, from writing or creating the tendency report and things like that. But down and distance, personnel, and formations are the ones that they're going to give you, the most valuable insight to what the offense wants to do and how they want to attack you. And then you also get into special situations, which, different special plays that they'll run. Mm-hmm. Everybody has a wrinkle or two that they'll put in to make you have to prepare for it. And it gives you. He talks a lot about developing this part of the game, which is a major part of the game, because if you can scout the opponent to a T and then give that information to the players, it's going to allow them to play faster, and it's going to put them in a better position to win. Yeah,
and in the end, it's what they know, not what you know.
Yeah, it's not what you know, right?
Hey, we don't play the game where it's a test on the coach, but obviously you got to know it to teach it. You got to know it inside and out to teach it.
Yep.
How about the last part of the book where he has a nice appendix there on scouting forms? I know that the first thing I saw when I took a look at this, I started thinking a year ago when I got all you guys the book. Remember Steve Belichick's book?
Yeah.
Coach Belichick's father, or he's the original Coach Belichick, on scouting football. And everybody read it, and then everybody did the report on an opponent, and then you guys gave me these huge manuals like, hey, here's the information on this guy. Which takes scouting to a whole other level. I mean, that's a podcast in and of itself to go through that book. But, what did you get out of these forms? Did you find anything interesting, anything new, anything that you think has value?
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole part of the book gives you a different idea of how to scout. Like, it gives you, the blocks of 5 linemen, so you could draw in, all the different formations and stuff like that, and then you kind of go through and you write down, down and distance and what the play is that they're running, and then you go over, and you could write in the stuff, and then when you go back and look at it, I mean, it's going to tell you a lot about how they want to attack you. And when you write it down, like he talks about writing it down and seeing it from a different point of view, because now all of the scouting things have escalated. They're advanced, film and all this stuff are readily accessible. But when you write it down like this, how he has it broken down here, it gives you a different illustration of it, and it puts you in a different mind frame, and it gives you a lot more insight and things that you could call versus certain plays that they run and when they're going to run them and things like that. So it gives you a lot. It's a lot there, and then he has also the scouting things for with the blocks and whatnot, so you can do the illustrations for scout team and things like that. So you write all these plays in there, and then you'll see the ones that come up more so than not, and it gives you a lot of insight to what they do offensively.
It does. And what it reminds me of, Jovon, is it looks like an old school way of doing it, because nowadays everyone's, you're breaking the film down and you click reports and there they are.
Yeah.
Right. But you brought up something interesting to me, that getting back to an old school way of doing things, because when you write it down, when it goes from your mind to a pencil to writing it down to drawing your own cards, those kind of things, I've got to believe that there's tremendous value to that, as opposed to just, let's just print whatever Huddle says. Here's what it is, and we broke it down. But when you write them down, it's like you write them down, and when your players write it down, as opposed to like, here's the electronic playbook, or here's this, and they're not writing anything. I don't know that they're learning as fast to the core of what you want. And it reminds me of when I remember being up at Winnipeg, and we used to come in the office pretty early, go to Tim Hortons and get the coffee and whatever breakfast sandwich about 5 o'clock in the morning, and then pop in about 5:30, and there's Mark Nelson, in the office, our defensive coordinator that year, and he's in there, and he's got, I think he was sleeping in the office too, but but that's Mark, and great coach. And he would sit there and literally draw everything. It's like I say, well, you have the computer, you got why don't you just take those reports? And his thing was always like, no, I need to do this because I need to know this to the core to teach it.
Right.
Do you?
Right. I agree. I think part of being a student of the game is taking what you see on film and putting it on paper, and it allows you to see things a lot differently. Like when we play games, I can call out what the offense is going to do by the way they line up on down and distance, because I've written it down and I've seen it on film. I've seen it on paper, so I've seen it in my mind. I've already kind of drew out what they can do out of this formation based on what I've seen on film and what I've written on paper. So it's kind of a correlation of the two. Being able to see it, visualize it, and then write it down gives you a little bit more of an advantage. So it allows you to play a lot faster because you've seen it before.
Oh, you're spot on. And so would you recommend the book?
Heck yeah. Heck yeah. I mean, any defensive coach, that is especially for me being a first-time coordinator, it breaks down things in a whole that would make you be able to coach a team defense with no issues at all whatsoever. So, I mean, it's definitely highly recommended. I mean, obviously, he's one of the greatest coaches that ever did it. Yeah. So, I mean, why not listen to one of the greats?
Yeah, and we're fortunate that he wrote this book, and it's sort of neat. It includes an online access to some video about this, and you in the book there's a spot there. I saw this little deal where you can hit on what do they call these little, scan them with your smartphone, these little deals there, and it goes to a video, and that's worth taking a look at too. So I think that's valuable. And it's interesting, Jovon, as toward the end of the week, just like at the end of this podcast, I do a section on tips and reminders, just like we do with our players, right? Tips and reminders. So these are some tips and reminders for coaches, all right? So now what I want to do is we're just going to sit and talk. I want to share some information on something. Have you ever been, you're in the season or off season and your mind, you want to get to bed and you just can't sleep very well. We've been there, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sleeping during the season or in high stress times seems to always be, it's been an issue for me. And to get quality sleep is important so you can have good energy throughout the day.
Absolutely.
Right? So you can see the value of that. And what I want to do is I want to share a secret that I have that helps me get good sleep at night. And when I don't use it, I do notice a difference. And what it is this it's called Serenity. It's a restful blend essential oil. So that's what this looks like here, right? And it's a blend of oils that is, I think it's fantastic for using in your routine in the evening. And you can put it on topically. I like to put it on the back of my neck, and then literally, like for people just listening, when the Monday podcast out, you're not gonna be able to see what I'm doing, but I put some oils, put a couple drops in my hands, and then you smell it in. It really relaxes you there. Here, you take a drop or two there, and then what we do is that helps you there, and then you can put it on the back of your neck. So that's applying it topically and aromatically, putting it in. How's that smell?
Amazing.
Yeah, right? I know.
Yeah.
And it's good because it helps you relax and get rest. And you do it. I usually do this a couple hours before, maybe an hour before I'm ready to go to bed. And then my wife even tells me, because we've got these, I think of it like sort of acupuncture points, how the nervous system works. And if you get your feet massaged a certain way, it'll make you do. So you just get a drop and you put it on your big toe. Somehow it stimulates you to sleep faster. So just one drop, right? So I'm like, wow, this is cool. So I said, hey, I'll hocus pocus at first. And then all of a sudden, when it works, I'm like, hey, I'm in. So this is Serenity. And we'll have something on the website if you want to learn a little bit more about it. Then they even have these soft gels, which if I've had a rough day or I really want to make sure I get, it's just these little, you take 2 of these before you go to bed. And it's got some of that blend in it. And it helps you, these are about an hour before you go to sleep. You take 2 of those and you go in there and you feel good when you're done, and I think it's a good bedtime routine, works great as a coach. There's some other things that you can do, like hacks to sleep better, like a cooler room, they say is always good. I've seen some good things out there. So I like to, use that. So you ever when you're in a hotel and you're on the road, if you put the temperature or the AC on, it's like it sleeps really good.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
When the AC's on.
Yeah. So little things like that, but it makes them, because I think in coaching, there's so much stress involved. And I really believe that you do want to be able to sleep well, because what you bring to those meetings in the morning in training camp, what you bring to, your day to day is a product of how effective your body is recovering during the time of sleep. And I think that's a pretty valuable thing. So I want to thank you for joining me on the show, Jovon.
Anytime.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. And it's good to, I think I get a lot of value out of this because I feel like I get to learn so much, and I enjoy re-listening to these podcasts myself. We just did it, but I actually, what do you say? Now I get it. That's why I think there's a lot of value in, you get these classic books, rereading them, classic podcasts, listening to them and taking the notes, and what happens is here, it's fantastic. And I think we're getting a lot of great feedback on the podcast right now. So for you out there, I want to thank you for joining us on the show. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure to subscribe in iTunes, give us a rating, comment on the show. That stuff all shows up. and it helps us in those ratings. If you're watching this on YouTube, all right, we do have a YouTube channel. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just Google in there on YouTube or check the search bar where it's just the Manny Matsakis Show, and you'll see it there. And if you hit the bell in the corner, if you like YouTube and that's the way you get the information, fantastic, and you'll get something on that. So feel free to make comments on a specific episode. You want to make a comment on this, then I can hit it in the Q&A on a different podcast. The other thing is, if you'd like to get all kinds of updates, just go to the website, mannymatsakis.com, where you'll get up to date. And here's how we release the information. Every Monday, year-round, we have a podcast that goes out. That's what this is, and that's the audio version. On Wednesdays, all right, there is a blog post or inside access feature that sometimes has a video, sometimes a blog post, gives you some information. And a lot of times there, it could be on anything, could be something relating to something we feel that can help you as a coach to optimize your life. Could be, heck, a few weeks ago I did one on, I was at home. It was interesting. I was in my mom's kitchen, and I had her teach me how to make a Greek soup with eggs and lemons and stuff like that. And I put it up, and it like blew up the internet for me. I had not seen so many people like, here's my mom, teaching us how to make soup, So I that was sort of neat. So that's it was a blog post that came out on a Wednesday. And then on Friday, this video version of the Monday podcast shows up where you get to go in and see that. So all this has great information. You do have transcriptions so they can literally type up every word we're saying. They don't have to write, the notes, just hit a button. It's all there. So that's a pretty cool deal that shows up on the Monday. So we got links to things we're referring to and so forth. So that's how this is working for us. So please feel free to subscribe with your email on the website. And that'll give you regular email alerts. You also receive my latest report. It's called Fill the Stadium. And Fill the Stadium is about 34-page report that I put together from years of having to do this. And I label it as it's a coach's secret formula to build a program and fill your stadium to capacity. It takes time to do it, but here's some insight of things I've learned from Mike Leach, Bill Snyder, and a lot of other great coaches I've been fortunate to have been around. So all you do is put your email in there, you get a download of that, and then you're in the tribe at that point. We'll get this thing going. So once again, Jovon, that was fun. Yeah, shoot, I'm about ready to relax after this. It's pretty good. All right, thanks once again. Appreciate everybody, and we will see you next week.